have you ever just watched a massive, well-intentioned plan to fix some big problem just completely blow up in everyone's faces? You know, the kind backed by experts and tons of money. But somehow, after all the dust settles, the problem is actually worse? It is so frustrating it doesn't make any sense, and you start to wonder, am I the only one seeing this?
Well, what if it's not an accident? What if that pattern of failure is actually predictable? What if it's the natural result of a very specific and deeply flawed way of looking at the world, a worldview so sure of its own brilliance that it's blind to the real-world wreckage it leaves behind?
Welcome to Animeconomy. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this exact pattern of failure by diving into one of the most powerful books of the last 50 years. We're digging into Thomas Sowell's absolute masterpiece, The Vision of the Anointed. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn the exact mindset that drives these failures. A four-step pattern that, once you see it, you will spot everywhere. And most importantly, a totally different way of thinking that can help us all avoid these disasters.
All right, let's get right into it. Sowell says that our biggest arguments aren't really about left versus right. They're actually a clash between two completely different visions of how the world operates. And one of these visions, the one he calls the vision of the anointed, is the root cause of so many of our biggest, most persistent problems.
So, what on earth is this vision? Look, it's not some secret club or a conspiracy. Think of it more like a software program running in the minds of a self-appointed intellectual and moral elite who genuinely believe they hold the keys to solving all of society's problems.
In Sowell's view, the anointed basically believe the world is a mess because ordinary people, that's you and me, the benighted, are just too ignorant or selfish to manage our own lives. So what's the fix? Well, obviously, the anointed have to step in, design these huge top-down plans and impose them on the rest of us, for our own good, of course. They see themselves as having this special, almost sacred wisdom, and because their intentions are so pure, the actual costs, the real-world evidence of failure, that's all just noise, or worse, it's the fault of anyone who dared to question their brilliant plan.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory. Sowell argues that when this vision is put into action, it follows an almost comically predictable and often tragic four-stage pattern. It's a repeating cycle of crisis, solution, failure, and denial.
Okay, here's how the playbook works. Step 1. A crisis is declared, one that only the anointed are wise enough to see. Step 2. A sweeping solution is proposed, which always involves giving more power to a central authority. Step 3. The plan is rolled out, and it fails miserably, often making things way worse. And that brings us to the really crucial final step, the response. You see, admitting they were wrong would shatter their self-image. So instead, they ignore the evidence, they blame the failure on anyone who opposed them, and they declare that the only answer is to double down with an even bigger, more powerful version of the same failed idea. It's a perfect feedback loop that protects them from ever having to face reality.
I know this might sound a little abstract, so let's ground it in a powerful, real-world example that Sowell covers in detail, the massive shift in criminal justice that happened in the 1960s. This is the four-stage pattern in action, crystal clear.
Here, you can see stages 1 and 2 perfectly. The crisis was that the justice system was supposedly too harsh and unenlightened. The grand solution, put perfectly here by the Attorney General at the time, was that the only thing that should matter is rehabilitation. Everything else, punishment, keeping the public safe, had to take a back seat. The idea was that criminals aren't really bad people, they're just victims of society who need our help and understanding.
And that brings us to stage 3, the results. And wow. Just look at this. The consequences were absolutely catastrophic. After these policies were put in place, the murder rate in the U.S., which had been falling for decades, suddenly reversed course and shot up like a rocket. By 1974, it had more than doubled. The solution didn't just fail to help, it created a national disaster.
And the damage was everywhere. The odds of an average person like you becoming a victim of violent crime tripled. The number of police officers killed in the line of duty tripled. And arrests of young people for murder, the very group this was supposed to be saving, more than tripled. The evidence was just overwhelming. So did they change course? Of course not. That's stage 4. They blamed society, they blamed poverty, they blamed anyone who disagreed, and they demanded even more of the same failed policies.
Okay, quick pause. If this pattern is starting to sound familiar and if this message is resonating with you, please help it reach more people. Just take a second to hit the like button and share this with someone who you think needs this perspective. It makes a huge difference.
So this raises a huge question, right? If the results are so clearly terrible, how does the vision survive?
Well, this is where Sowell argues they launch what is essentially a war on reality itself, using specific tactics to shield their ideas from ever being proven wrong.
One of the biggest tactics is twisting statistics. You've probably heard that half of all marriages end in divorce. It sounds like a massive social crisis, right? But it's a complete statistical trick. It comes from comparing the number of divorces in one year to the number of new marriages in that same year. That's like saying half the population died this year just because the number of deaths was half the number of births. It's meaningless. The reality, when you actually look at the data for all married adults, was that only about 11% were divorced. But with a scary, misleading number, you can invent a crisis that demands your solution.
Another key weapon is what Sowell calls verbal fetishes. These are words that aren't really about describing the world. They're about signaling that you're one of the good guys and shutting down any real debate. So if someone makes a really clear, evidence-based case against your big plan, you don't have to argue with their facts, you just call their argument simplistic. You don't have to defend the results of a policy, you just say it promotes diversity. These words act like conversation enders. They make it impossible to have a real argument.
This control over language even makes simple communication awkward and clunky. The goal here isn't clarity. It's to create a verbal password, kind of like a secret handshake. Using this kind of complicated phrasing signals that you're part of the in-group, one of the enlightened. It's about identifying who's on your team, not about communicating an idea clearly.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute core of Sowell's entire argument. If the vision of the anointed is the problem, what's the alternative? It's a massive shift in thinking, from searching for solutions to navigating trade-offs.
You see, the vision of the anointed is built on the idea that perfect, cost-free solutions are possible. They ask things like, how can we make this 100% safe? But that question ignores a fundamental truth about our world. As Sowell brilliantly puts it, sometimes safety can be fatal. What in the world does he mean by that?
Well, the story of the pesticide DDT is a horrifyingly perfect example. The solution to the potential environmental risks of DDT was a simple, categorical ban. It felt good, it felt safe. But what was the trade-off? DDT was a miracle weapon against malaria-carrying mosquitoes. In a place like Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, malaria cases had dropped from millions down to just a handful. It was incredible. After the ban, the cases shot right back up to 2.5 million. A solution to one problem created a much, much deadlier one. Millions of people died for a safe solution that ignored its catastrophic trade-off.
And this is the fundamental difference right here on one slide. The anointed look for perfect solutions. They want to impose a single right answer from the top down, and they treat the costs and side effects as just annoying details. But reality doesn't give us solutions. It forces us to make trade-offs. The other way of seeing the world understands that progress is slow, that society is a complex system, and that the best we can ever do is wisely manage the costs against the benefits, because there is no such thing as a perfect, cost-free answer to anything.
So we've covered the vision, the pattern of failure it creates, the tactics used to defend it, and the alternative way of thinking. Now, the question really turns inward. It's about analyzing ourselves.
Ultimately, Sowell's book forces each of us to ask a really deep and personal question. When you look at the world's biggest problems, what's your gut reaction? Do you instinctively look for that one perfect solution that a few smart people can figure out and impose on everyone else? Or do you see a world of incredible complexity where every single choice has a cost, and navigating these endless trade-offs requires the freedom and knowledge of millions of different people making their own decisions? I genuinely love to know what you think in the comments below.
Thank you so much for watching.
If you stayed until the end, it means you're part of a small group of people committed to understanding how the economy works and how it shapes the world.
So subscribe to Animeconomy. Here, we turn economics, politics, and power dynamics into clear, visual stories so you can understand how the world really works.
To go even deeper on these ideas, there's a link to purchase The Vision of the Anointed in the description below. I highly recommend it.
Goodbye, and I'll see you in the next one.